Oh my gosh, the word spanking is used more times than the. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my book club. So I waited halfway through March to film my February wrap up. If you're wondering why I waited this long, the answer is pretty simple. I'm a bitch. Let me know down in the comments if you forgive me or if I deserve a spanking. If you're wondering where I got this, it was a gift. I'm not gonna say who gave it to me because I have lots to say about a lot of things. I'm glad you're here. Yes, spanking. This is indeed foreshadowing for a book that will be discussed soon. Just you wait. So before we get started, please consider subscribing if you aren't already. And with that being said, we shall begin discussing the literature I read this month. So the first book I read is a 5-star read, and that is Confessions by Kanae Minato. I hope I pronounced that name right. This was originally written in Japanese, and it was translated to English, and I am so glad that it was, because this book was fantastic. So we follow this woman who is a teacher, and at the beginning of the book, she accuses 2 of her students of murder. She is they're in middle school, so they're pretty young, so this is kind of shocking for a book to start this way. And the rest goes from there. I will not say as much as possible because this is one of those books, it's one of those books that you just need to go in completely fresh. It is a thriller. It is one of the best thrillers I have ever read. It is certainly a new all-time favorite. I read this entire book in one sitting. The opening scene is so bone-chillingly dark. The rest of the book finds even darker and more sinister places to take you, and it's a short book. In addition to that, it has probably one of the most shocking and satisfying endings I have ever encountered in thrillers in recent memory. Also, it's got so much commentary on Japanese law enforcement, and the rise of violence in the youth, and family dynamics, and the justice system. I have so many thoughts on this book that I can't possibly condense them in this little segment over here. So if you want to hear me talk about this book in depth, and with spoilers, especially if you've already read it, I did do a live show on my friend Savannah's channel. This one over here, and I will link this down below. Watch all of our thoughts. Most of us loved it, and I think you would enjoy. The next book I read was definitely a new experience for me. This was a book told in verse, and because of that, I didn't give it a rating because I have never read a book in verse before. I don't even know a single fucking thing about poetry. So I was like, I clearly don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know if this is good poetry, but I enjoyed it. I mean, I loved it. Actually, this was really fantastic. If you have any thoughts on this book, let me know. Comment section's yours. This book is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I didn't rate this book because I read it more as an educational experience. So the protagonist of this book is a guy named Will, and the book opens up with him learning about the fact that his brother has been shot dead. So Will is an African-American, and he lives in a place where crime runs rampant. And Jason Reynolds certainly does say many things about the culture. He talks about how things like violence and gang culture are very common in places like these. It's fantastic, insightful, and I sincerely hope all of you check this out. I learned so much stuff. And, I'm sure we can all do some learning over here. Be more empathetic, be better, right? Right, good stuff. So the next book I read is a book that I gave 3 out of 5 stars to. I think it's a thriller or a horror. I don't know what I would call this, but this is The End of the Road by Craig DeLuey. So we follow 5 college friends who are traveling across America in a minivan. Now, as things go, the road breaks. No, the road doesn't break. The van breaks, and they end up on a road that is not on the map. This road leads them to a town that is also not on the map. And they run into this trailer park where various horrific and frankly hilarious things happen, and it's just a series of events that just goes completely awry. Honestly, the best thing about the audiobook or the reading experience of this was the narration. I need to credit this guy. His name is Christian Rummel, and he voices 5 people in this book, and they all sound completely different. It really helps tell these characters apart, because if I wasn't doing the audiobook, I would not know who anybody was. Other than that, it's certainly creative. I mean, it completely goes off the rails at the end, hence the rating. But the journey to that ending is so gross and funny and demented, and I had fun for the most part, so 3 out of 5. So the next book I read is a thriller by Catherine Ryan Howard, and that is The Liar's Girl. I gave this 3.5 stars. And this thriller follows a woman named Allison. The book opens with her basically being visited by these two detectives regarding a series of murders that's happening near this college campus. At first, Allison is like, "What
the hell do I have to do with this? Why are you visiting me? I'm innocent."
Why did I make her sound like that? No, she was
hella Irish
in the audiobook, so I don't know why I made her sound like myself. Sorry. The detectives tell her that there is a copycat killer who is killing people the same way that a killer had been killing people, I think 10 years ago. I hope I got that right. Fucking, I don't give a shit. Anyway, so here's the catcher. The person who was in jail, who the copycat killer was copying, was Allison's ex-lover from her college sweetheart. So 2/3 of the book is really good, but like most thrillers, it just completely falls flat in the end. The motivation of the antagonist was just so lame and underwhelming and stupid and annoying, and I just didn't care. It just did not match the rest of the story in terms of intensity and excitement. But other than that, it was a really fun, fresh, fish out of water scenario. Normally, I don't like detectives in books, but I do like when someone who doesn't know what they're doing is thrust into a scenario in which they would have to play the role of law enforcement, and that trope is used here, and it's really good until the ending. Ugh, I hate when that happens. So the next two books are two that I'm going to lump together, so I'm going to be lumping in book 5 and 6 together, and that is going to be Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I saw an interview of Rupi Kaur on Jimmy Fallon, Kimmel Fallon, one of those fucking guys, and she just sounded so cool and down to earth, unlike the interviewer. I know. I'm just saying it. I don't like the way people interview people today. It sucks. Let your guests speak. Okay, welcome to my TED Talk. Anywho, let's continue. So I read these books pretty much like in the span of 2 days, and they were so cool and down to earth, just like her. So I did some research on the merits of the book as poetry, and it turns out that many people on PoetryTube, which is apparently a thing, you know, people like Rachel Oates, who I've been watching a lot of her videos recently, she has had critiques of this book, and basically her main gripe with these was that they weren't actually poems, and just because the author was saying something important doesn't mean it's good poetry. Like, she said that they were like Instagram captions and Tumblr posts, and that they were just like random sentences that were like broken into verse, and I don't know if I agree or not, but like at the end of the day, she's the poetry person. I don't know a fucking thing about poetry. I gave Milk and Honey 4 stars. I gave The Sun and Her Flowers 3.5 out of 5 stars. And note, I am rating these books exclusively on how much I enjoyed them. I don't know anything about poetry, and I'm going to shut up about not knowing about poetry because I think you all get the message. So the next book I read is my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I gave this book 4 out of 5. And the title of this book is literal. So the story is centered around these two friends. One is named Abby, the other one is named Gretchen, and one of them gets possessed. The relationship between Abby and Gretchen is just so well done. We meet them from when they are kids, and Grady Hendrix uses the first part of the book to chronicle every cherished moment these girls have had with one another growing up. Also, the 80s nostalgia actually plays a role in the Exorcism, which, you know, girl, if you know, you know, bitch, that was fun. So 2 thumbs up for Grady Hendrix. Now, the next book is where I'm gonna need my prop. I think this is called a flogger. So this is gonna be out throughout the remainder of this wrap up because we are gonna be talking about some porn. Anne Rice, the woman who wrote Interview with a Vampire, has always been an interesting person to me because I listened to her interview with Charlie Rose back in the 90s, I believe, and I was like, wow, she says so many things. Like, she talks about how vampires are a metaphor for the outcasts in society. So I picked up a book called The Claiming of the Sleeping Beauty by Anne Rice. And I did not rate this book. I finished it. I don't even know what to say about this book. So her Interview with the Vampire books were like widely popular and I'm sure have made like a massive fortune. And spoiler alert, this book had no vampires. Oh my gosh, the word spanking is used more times than the plot. So this is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, if you couldn't tell by the title. It focuses on the events after Sleeping Beauty, except in Sleeping Beauty it ends with the prince taking her off. They ride into the sunset or whatever, but this book focuses on what happens after they ride into the sunset and when they arrive at their destination. Their destination just so happens to be a castle which doubles as a BDSM theme park. Also, all the characters in this book are bisexual. So everyone does everything with everyone, and there is role-playing and props used. This book makes 50 Shades of Grey, which I have read, all 3 of them, feel like a children's book. I am not kidding. Like, so many times while I was reading this that I want to freaking, feel the need to get like, baptized or something. And like 50 Shades, I shit you not, this book ends with a cliffhanger. It's open-ended. There's 3 of them. I think 4 of them. She wrote like a 4th one. Like, it's out. It exists. So needless to say, this was a very interesting reading experience. I don't recommend this book, or at least I wouldn't publicly on this channel, but if any of you get curious and read it, first of all, trigger warnings. Like, this book is super toxic. This is not a romance book. This is super toxic. So do your research before you read this book and let me know how that went. The final book I read this month last month, was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This is a historical drama. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And since I already spoke about this book at length, I'm just gonna link you to my video. The first part of that video is me basically giving a spoiler-free summary and thoughts on the book. I don't feel like talking anymore, so I'm just gonna link you to that and check for the description. And yeah, 4.5 out of 5. Anyway, that is all for today. Be sure to like and comment and subscribe. I hope to see you in future videos. Thank you so much for watching. Have fun and take care.
I lose myself